Hello and welcome back to the Friday 5 for January 27th, 2023. My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. And it's been a cold week out here in Minnesota. We got a little more snow and it's going to get really cold the next few days. We got 5 questions from the week that you may find interesting. 5 quick questions of things that constantly come up when I talk to clients. Question number 1 this week: does my live-in boyfriend inherit my house when I die? So this came up this week with a client who's been living with her boyfriend for a long time. They have no intention of getting married. They're just happy living with each other. But it's her house, and it's only in her name. And she wanted to know what happens to that house when she dies. Now, she doesn't have any children. She doesn't really have any other living relatives that are in close proximity to her. She has a couple of siblings, one in California, one out in the East Coast somewhere. So her question was, my boyfriend, of course, gets my house when I die, right? Because he's the one living there. But unfortunately, the answer is if she doesn't have an estate plan, if there's no will in place or a trust, if there's no direction left behind that he's the one to get the house, then he won't be getting the house. And here in Minnesota, there's also an option of what's called a transfer on death deed, which would mean when she dies, the house could automatically go to him. It's like a beneficiary designation. So if you're living with your live-in boyfriend, but you're not married, and you're not planning on getting married, definitely want to look into the importance of an estate plan to make sure that that house, if it's only in your name, goes to the right person after you're gone. Question number 2 is one that comes up quite a bit, and that's, how do I add a newborn to my estate plan? So in this case, we have longtime clients who already had 3 kids and we're adding a 4th kid to their estate plan at this point. The child was born right before Christmas, and the simple answer is we can do a codicil, which is a fancy legal term for an amendment to your will, and that's just making a change to add that newborn to your will. However, if your current estate plan does not have any children in it, so if this is your first child, rather than a codicil, you'll probably want to do a new will, because you're going to want to add provisions for guardianship for that child, as well as a trustee to manage the money for them while they're under the age of 18. And of course, if you don't have a will yet, this is a really important time for you to understand the importance of having an estate plan in place to take care of your children, especially when they're under the age of 18. Question number 3 this week: can I represent my company in court? This one also comes up a lot. In this case, the individual runs a company and had brought a lawsuit in small claims court, and the lawsuit was able to at least get started there, but at some point at the first court appearance, the judge said, hold on a second, you're not a lawyer, you're just the owner of the company, you cannot represent the company, you need to find a lawyer. And so of course then the client was calling my office to set up time to see if I would be able to represent them. This is an important thing for you to understand, and I think I have prior videos on this and blog posts as well, that a company cannot represent itself. You need to have a lawyer represent you. Now, if you have general counsel of the company, if there's a lawyer who's the owner of the company, that may be a way to have that person represent the company. But in general, if you're running a coffee shop down the street and you need to sue somebody, if you're not a lawyer, you can't just represent the coffee shop. Question number 4 this week comes in the context of a long contract that we were reviewing, and the question was, what does the jurisdiction clause mean? So in this case, my client has a dispute with another company, and we were looking at the contract that they signed, and unfortunately for the work that we're doing, the jurisdiction clause in this contract places jurisdiction in another state. So in this case, it was down in Mississippi. That's where the other company is located, and my client may have to bring a lawsuit. And so we had to discuss the fact that bringing a lawsuit in Minnesota may not be successful because of this jurisdiction clause in the contract. So in fact, we may be forced to find a Mississippi attorney to be able to come in and represent the client and bring the lawsuit down there. And this also goes into then the economics of this situation. So the amount of money that's owed is not a lot of money, and hiring another out-of-state attorney to work on this case may not actually make economic sense. So we may have to find other ways to get this matter resolved directly with their client. And question number 5 this week, also from that same contract, is what's a limitation on liability clause? So in this case, the contract, in addition to that jurisdiction clause, had a clause that limits the liability of the other party, and that limitation only goes to what my client had paid to them. So meaning if my client only paid them $100, they can only bring a lawsuit for $100. Now, the first thing we'd have to look at is whether Mississippi allows those kinds of liability clauses and how they get interpreted by the court. Because my client was looking at an issue of possibly lost profits and other business damages from the client's inability to fulfill the terms under the contract. So there's a lot that kind of goes into this decision, but I can already anticipate that defendant that's going to be looking at that liability clause saying, listen, you signed this contract, you agreed to it, the limit is to what you paid us, and you only paid us $100. It was a little bit more for my client, but it was $100 was paid, so that's going to be the limitation of what you can sue us for. So those are 5 questions that came up this week. Hopefully you found some of these interesting. Maybe you've come into contact with these. As I said, on a few of these, I actually have either blog posts or videos where we can go a little bit deeper onto this. If you'd like to ask questions for future episodes, there's a link in the description where you can click and submit a question. If you found this helpful, hit the like button, subscribe on YouTube. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you next week.